Hello, my name's Mac, and this is my deck tech for Radha, Heart of Keld. So, Radha, Heart of Keld is a red-green commander. For 3 mana, you get a 3/3 Elf Warrior. As long as it's your turn, Radha has First Strike, and you can also pay 6 mana to give her +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. Alright, cool. That's not terribly exciting, but this middle line of text here is, you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may play lands from the top of your library. So what Radha does is it gives you a unique method of hitting your land drops, right? So instead of playing, your Cultivates, your Kodama's Reaches, if you're trying to go even bigger, your Sky Shroud Claims, your Nissa's Renewals, Boundless Realms, whatever, right? Instead, you can find the lands on top of your deck. So what this deck lends itself to is a ramp package that's more playing additional lands and top deck manipulation than the conventional instant and sorcery route. So another thing that I think Radha allows you to do as a result of that I think is really neat is the deck is less oriented around winning with landfall payoffs and more so just the lands themselves, right? So to start with the win cons, first we've got Urza Saga. New card from Modern Horizons 2. Very new, might already be my favorite card. This is just a cool fucking card. So it's a saga, which means that the first chapter is activated when it comes to play. Taps for colorless. Not so exciting. Second ability is it gains pay 2, tap it, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. At its base rate, you're tapping it on the first turn when it has that ability, and then on your next turn, during your upkeep, after you've untapped, but before you get the third counter, because sagas trigger after your draw step for a very odd reason, you get the opportunity to create a second construct, right? So for effectively 6 mana, because you're paying 2 and tapping a land, you get two 2/2s that grow bigger as you get more artifacts, which is not terribly exciting. There's a few ways to make this absolutely busted, though, and we'll go over that in a minute. Second land win condition is Field of the Dead. You know what this card does. It's pretty sick with, where are we? Vesuva, right? Then you're making double the zombies. It's a staggeringly effective win con. Not the most exciting. I prefer Urza Saga if I have the opportunity to pick, but Field of the Dead absolutely gets the job done. Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. This card is not really a win condition. I've played decks in the past that can trigger it much more often, and again, it's a absolute heater with Vesuva if you can trigger it. You have to jump through some hoops to trigger it in this deck, right? I'll show you how many mountains I'm running. Spoiler alert, it's not very many. And then finally, we've got Dark Depths Thespian Stage. This combo results in creating a 20/20 flying indestructible creature token, which is very good at reducing your opponent's life total to 0. So that is the land fall, or the land win conditions. Next, we've got some lands that will ramp you. So I've got Lotus Field, so it's got hexproof. ETB's tapped. When it comes into play, sacrifice 2 lands. Doesn't sound like ramp, but it taps for 3 of any one color, right? So it's good to copy with Thespian Stage, and it's good to play when I've got the ability to play lands again from my graveyard, right? So in the short term, it doesn't ramp me, but in the long term, I've effectively drawn 2 cards, right? Because if I, deeper into the game, I will have played as many lands as I've had access to. I will not be limited by the number of lands I can play in a turn. And Lotus Field is 3 mana for the cost of 1 land, right? You've drawn 2 lands from your deck by playing Lotus Field. So I'll take a Divination for 0 mana. That's pretty good. Castle Garenbrig, you have to jump through some hoops to make it ramp you, but it does that. I'm already playing forests, so it's not really worse than a forest for any reason. And then Ancient Tomb, you know what it does. Makes 2 mana. It's cool. Next, let's go over the other utility lands. So Dryad Arbor. This card is absolutely busted. I didn't think I'd be saying that. Dryad Arbor, it seems pretty innocuous. It's just a land that's also a creature, right? But in a deck that's really maximizing interactions with those 2 card types, this card is insane. Then we've got some, Maze of Ith, It doesn't tap for mana, but it does if you have Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, so that's, those are some neat utility. Wasteland, I cut Strip Mine because I found myself, like, I don't want to make suboptimal plays, right? I understand the spirit of Commander is having fun, but I want to play my deck correctly, right? I don't want to pull punches. It doesn't feel good when that happens it doesn't feel good if someone pitied you enough to not kill you and then you beat them. It's like, that's a very hollow victory, right? So finding myself in the situation where it was the optimal line to just start strip mining people's basic lands so they can't play the game, like, I wouldn't do it, but I don't want to feel like I have to not do it, right? So I cut strip mine altogether. Wasteland's good enough. It gets the cradles, it gets the, lands that tap for 6 if they're loaded up with, overgrowths, Dawn's Reflections, Market Festivals, whatever. And then we've got some MBFCs. Velocate Awakening is really good when you have a handful of lands, right? If you're playing lands off the top of your deck with Radha, you're not playing the lands in your hand. And so, sometimes you want to dump them, and that card's good for this. Alligator Recovery, it's so good. It's a really good card. You should play this card. And then Shatterskull Smashing is a little bit of removal. The sorcery side of Shatterskull Smashing is not nearly good enough to be played in my deck, but because it's a land on the other side, like, why not? It's free. Then we've got some fixing lands here. Taiga, Stomping Ground, they're fetchable. Command Tower, Spire Garden, Grove of the Burn Willows, Gruul Turf, Firelit Thicket, and Carplucent Forest tap for my colors, so I play them because I need colored mana to cast spells, right? Then we've got fetches. Playing a landfall deck, you want to play lands that let you get to landfall triggers in a turn, right? And also, uniquely in this deck, they allow you to change the top card of your library with Radha, right? So I really like having shuffle effects here because I can, shuffle away things I put back with Sylvan Library, things I know are on top with Radha, right? If I have 3 land plays in a turn, akin to like getting a land on top of your Bolas' Citadel, in fact, I want the opposite. I want lands to be on top of my deck. So if I have many opportunities to shuffle my deck, right, I can play lands off the top many times in a turn. I wouldn't recommend playing this deck if you're new, because that's taking a lot of game actions. Just like, play 3 fetch lands from my graveyard, check the top card, or I guess not 3 fetches, but have 3 in play from a previous turn. Check the top card, it's not a land, I'll fetch. Check the top card, it's not a land, I'll fetch. It's a lot of shuffling, right? When it becomes suboptimal to shortcut multiple fetches, you're taking some longer turns. Then finally we've got the basics. So I'm playing 6 forests, one of which is a snow-covered forest for the sake of Field of the Dead. And then I'm playing 5 mountains, one of which is snow-covered for the purposes of Field of the Dead. You could argue that it's optimal to play a more even split in case something happens to my one snow-covered. I don't think that's ever mattered. I mean, it might. Hypothetically, it's probably optimal to play more snow-covered than not, for whatever reason. It has never, ever come up. And if it does come up, I'll say, you know what? The value I lost by not having snow-covered basics is made up for the fact that I always get to use the art that I like. And it's that one. Ooh, shiny. Alright, those are the lands. Next, let's talk about the ramp. So we've got 3 kinds of ramp here. We've got bonus land plays. This is pretty integral to the function of the deck, right? Cards that let me play additional lands off the top. I'm not playing any sorceries that ramp me, right? So the only means I have of getting a mana advantage is these, or, the next thing we'll get to. Azusa lets me play 2 lands off the top of my deck. It's an incredible card. We know it's good. Oracle lets me play cards off the top. Oracle is, like, comparatively much worse in this deck as compared to other decks that run Oracle, because my commander already does part of the good things that Oracle does. But, it's redundancy if Radha gets removed, right? I don't want to be paying like 7 mana for Radha in the event that she dies twice. And then Dryad of the Elysian Grove also gets me a bonus land play every turn, but it importantly enables Valakut, right? Valakut requires you having other mountains in play. I'm only actually running 5 mountains, I guess 7 with my duels, which means I could do at most 6 damage. That's not good, right? Valakut would not be worth putting in the deck if that's all I could do. So with Dryad of the Elysian Grove, it turns into more of a win condition, especially if I can, like, Vesuva my Valakut, or find Valakut, Vesuva, and a number of other things, cast Scapeshift. Like, it's pretty solid. Then we have the direct ramp spells. This is kind of like a, a motley crew of ramp spells in that, you know, Soul Ring and Mana Crypt, they're incredibly powerful. If you're watching this video, you know what Commander is. You know that those cards are great. Lotus Cobra. I just showed you 8 fetch lands and 5 ways to play additional lands on each of my turns. Lotus Cobra is good. Dockside Extortionist and Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. So Ragavan seems kind of out of place, I will admit, because it just seems like it's not impactful enough to be good in Commander, right? This is a modern card. Why is it in here? Well, I wanted a few ways to be able to play Radha on turn 2. And, you know, Ragavan hitting my opponent, making a treasure, allows me to access 3 mana on turn 2, right? On top of that, he also lets me play cards off the top of my opponent's library, which in a deck like this that has, like, a lot of tutors and a lot of, you know, fundamentally I'm playing 8 fetch lands, that's a lot of tutors. I'm going to find myself, like, falling into the same gameplay patterns every game, unless I play something like Ragavan that lets me, you know, spice it up with my opponent's cards. Get a little chaos going in the game. Then Dockside Extortionist is an insane card, even more insane with Urza Saga, right? If my opponents have, you know, even just a handful of artifacts and enchantments, say they have 3, right? Playing Dockside Extortionist gives me access to 3 more mana and pumps up all of my constructs by +3/+3, which is like a very, very conservative estimate. That honestly, that's even unrealistically low, right? If I get 3, that sucks, right? And if I, it sucks as compared to like Dockside Extortionist's ceiling and floor, right? And even then, it's a goblin that's paying for itself. Like, it's a ritual. That Pyretic Ritual is not a card I want to play in my Commander decks, but like, there's a time and a place for it, right? Finally, we've got the Recursion. So we've got 3 ways to play lands from the graveyard. These 2 cards do basically the same thing. This is a creature that's fetchable. This is a not creature that won't die to board wipes. And then we've got Ancient Green Warden. This card is kind of a house. It's a 5/7 with reach, lets me play lands from my graveyard, and then if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent I control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time, right? So Valakut's hitting for 6, Field of the Dead is making 2 zombies, any of my numerous landfall payoffs in the deck are, you know, doing it twice. Wrenn 6 and Life from the Loam are cheap, and they can get stuff back repeatedly. And in the next section, I'm going to show you something that is just bonkers, that involves Wrenn 6 and Life from the Loam. So I'm actually going to put these here, and let's look at the bonkers thing. So here's my tutors. I've got a bunch of them. The most important thing going on here is Survival of the Fittest, Wrenn 6 or Life from the Loam, and Dryad Arbor. This is dirty. This is absolutely nasty. You find Dryad Arbor with Survival of the Fittest. I will discard any creature in my deck if it means getting Dryad Arbor into my hand with Survival of the Fittest in play, provided I have one of these 2 cards, right? No creature in my deck is a higher priority than Dryad Arbor, because I can pay a green, discard Dryad Arbor, search for a creature, get it back with Wrenn 6, discard it again, search for a creature, right? If I can, you know, get some card draw going somehow, I can repeatedly cast Life from the Loam in my turn by dredging. It's silly. It turns out, actually, this was news to me when I added it to the deck. It turns out that Survival of the Fittest is a very good card. I know. Don't let the secret out. I don't want it to spike. So Survival of the Fittest, we've got Gamble. It finds anything. The cost of occasionally discarding the thing I was looking for is actually not that bad in this deck of all decks, because generally if it's a land or a creature, I can get it back somehow. I'm not like a graveyard-oriented deck. Like, ideally, I don't want to discard the thing that I just looked for, but it's not the end of the world, right? Then we've got Green Sun Zenith, finds Dryad Arbor on turn 1. Another reason Dryad Arbor is insane, because it can ramp me to Radha on turn 2. We've got Elvish Reclaimer. It tutors for specific lands. It's just like a crop rotation on a stick. It's a little bit expensive, but I like that it's repeatable, especially because I'm doing things with lands in my graveyard, right? Then we've got Tooth and Nail and Finale of Devastation that are creature tutors that when I have a lot of mana can end the game. I like doing my, jerk off, fetch, check the top card, fetch, check the top card, taking lots of game actions and not going anywhere. but for the sake of my opponents, I want to play things that can actually end the game, so I don't just like do nothing and then lose. Then we got Imperial Recruiter. A lot of the... Basically, this deck is engine pieces and beaters. And the beaters are just kind of interchangeable. Like, I don't really need to tutor for any specific beater. But all of the engine pieces are, like, power 2 or less and can be found with Imperial Recruiter. So, you know, there's many creatures in this deck that I can't find with Imperial Recruiter, and I've just found that it doesn't matter. Next, let's take a look at the card advantage engines in the deck. So I've got a few kinds of card advantage, and to, you know, a lesser extent card selection, right? Because with Radha, top deck manipulation becomes card advantage. If I can play lands off the top, every land I play off the top is a land I'm not playing from my hand, which means I've effectively drawn a card at that point, right? So I want to maximize the ability to do that. I'm going to do that with Scroll Rack, Miri's Guile, Sylvan Library, and Senses Divining Top, right? So Sylvan Library is already an incredibly powerful card. We know that. But in Radha, like, not only do I have access to basically drawing 3 cards a turn, but it's without the life loss, right? Because I can just put lands back on top. If I find 2 things and a land, under normal circumstances, even if you don't need the land, you draw it anyway because you want to get it out of the way, right? With Radha, I don't need to do that because I can just like play the land off the top, right? And that clears the top of my deck. Sensitive Divining Top is nuts because it's repeatable. I can fetch, check the top 3, fetch again if I want to. And then Scroll Rack is sick because, again, just like with Valakut Awakening, my hand's getting pretty full with stuff that I, you know, they're lands. I can play them off the top. I don't need to play them from my hand. And again, you know, for those of you that were not counting, which I don't blame you for not doing, I'm playing 45 lands. Right? Not all of them tap for mana. They're not all mana sources, but it's 45 lands I can play off the top of my deck. So even if I'm fetching and reducing my hit density, I'm doing better than most in regards to finding things on the top. And then Miri's Guile is not a terribly potent card, but it kind of does the thing that I want to be doing. So I keep it in for fun. Next, I want to talk about my card advantage engines. So you've got Valakut Exploration, Vivian Monster's Advocate, Orin Frostfang, and Toski Bearer of Secrets. So Valakut Exploration, it's actually even occasionally a win con. Whenever I play a land, I can impulse draw a top card, and if I don't play it, it deals 1 to each of my opponents, a la Chandra Torch of Defiance, that kind of deal. Except I have until the end of the turn to cast it. So this card's cool, good with fetches, good with Ancient Green Warden, right? If I can go Ancient Green Warden and then fetch a couple times, I can play any of the top, like, whatever, 10 cards of my deck, and then anyone that I don't choose to play, ping each of my opponents, which is, like, a very strong effect. Vivian Monster's Advocate is... The jury's still out on this one. I've resolved it a few times. It feels pretty good. Being able to play creatures off the top is good, because if I don't have top deck manipulation, oftentimes I'm, like, bricking on a creature, which is funny. Like, the Bolas' Citadel mindset is that getting a land is bricking. But for me, not getting a land is bricking. So Vivian allows me to play things that aren't lands off the top of my deck. And then also this effect is really powerful because a lot of my engines are like redundant, right? But they're still multi-part, right? So I'm not, if I have Azusa and Wayward Swordtooth and Exploration out, right? I can play a lot of extra lands, but without a fetch or a Ramanap Excavator, I can't reuse the fetches, right? So a lot of those land drops are going to waste. Vivian allows me to find 2 things, right? And generally most of my engines are 2 or 3 pieces, so I can find, you know, I can put together an entire engine with that. Then Orin Frostfang and Toski Bearer of Secrets are pretty similar. Orin Frostfang is kind of a house with Radha because she gets First Strike on my turn. First Strike Death Touch is apparently quite good. And then, you know, they make me draw cards. I want to be drawing cards because that's how you win games of Magic the Gathering, is by playing cards. Generally, strategies that don't include that are unsuccessful. You want to be playing your cards. Then I've got my, you know, one-off card draw spells. So Rich Card's Expertise is notoriously good, probably not as powerful in this deck as most, because I'm not really getting humongous creatures unless I'm already winning the game. Like, yeah, if I play Crater Hoof Behemoth, it's going to be humongous, right? I'd draw 22 cards if I wanted to play a Crater Hoof. But I don't need Rich Card's Expertise if I have a Crater Hoof out, right? I'm still testing it. Maybe it's good enough, maybe it's not. We'll find out. Jessica's Will. This card's really good. It lets you play cards. That's a powerful effect. Reforge the Soul. For a while I thought this is in here until I can get a Wheel of Fortune, right? But it's surprisingly good with Sensei's Divining Top, right? We know how Terminus interacts with Top in Legacy, where even though they're both sorceries, like you can top on your opponent's turn, draw a card, and because Miracle triggers, like you can get around the timing restriction of sorceries by, if you activate Miracle, you can play it at instant speed. And wheeling right before your turn, right, getting any interaction your opponents were saving out of their hand, granted, they get a fresh 7, but going into your turn with your own fresh 7 and, all of your mana untapped is sick. I thought I was going to cut this as soon as I get Wheel of Fortune. I think that spot maybe going to Rich Card's Expertise. They may get switched out. Escape to the Wilds is similar to Jessica's Will. You don't get mana, and it costs more, but it has the benefit of letting you play an additional land drop, and also, unlike Jessica's Will, you have until the end of your next turn to play all the cards, right? So you can tap out for Escape to the Wild, and then on your next turn, you've got an extra 5 cards to deal with, or to work with, right? So that's the card advantage. Here is the various utility spells I have that don't really fall under any of the other categories. So we've got Protection. Sylvan Safekeeper lets me sacrifice a land to give a creature Shroud, so that, evades removal. Deflecting Swat evades removal. Heroic Intervention evades board wipes and removal. Tybalt's Trickery, it counters something, right? Sometimes they get something really big off of it, but that's, if I know that my opponent resolving a spell is going to lose me the game, at worst, Tybalt's Trickery flips into something and I still lose the game, right? If I can avoid losing the game, I will pay any cost to do that because I can't win if I've lost, right? So that's the interaction in regards to protection. Then we've got removal. It's pretty sparse. This deck is, being in red-green, your access to board wipes is pretty mediocre. I could play Blasphemous Act, but I already have a lot of mana. I'd kind of just rather, be able to thin out the board with a one-sided board wipe, like Azuri's Predation. Because it's one-sided, I'd kind of rather play a really bad Cyclonic Rift than a really good Wrath of God. Just because I have a lot of my own creatures, and this doesn't kill my creatures. We've got Beast Within. It kills a thing. We know what this card does. It kills a thing. Vandal Blast kills artifacts, but not my artifacts, which is good. We like that. Bane of Progress does kill my artifacts, and when I'm trying to go off with Urza Saga, that's a liability. But I don't think that that's enough of a downside to justify cutting it. Importantly, it's a 2/2, so even though it's a 6 mana beater, it's tutorable with every creature tutor I have. Imperial Recruiter will find it. So that's good. Finally, actually, we've got Shadow Spear and Noxious Revival. Shadow Spear can give my stuff lifelink and trample and take away indestructible and hexproof. There's no tricks here. Reading the card tells you what it does. It's findable with Urza Saga. I can give lifelink to Rurik Thar. It's neat. Noxious Revival is super sick. It's 1 Phyrexian green for an instant, where its effect is you put target card in a graveyard on top of its owner's library, right? So I can, I have various top deck manipulation sources. This is an efficient way to get back something that I've already used. This is an efficient way to, if my opponent's doing some reanimation nonsense, I can fizzle the effect by nope, Unburial Rites is targeting something in your graveyard, right? If it's now on top of your deck, that effect fizzles. So I've paid 2 life. They've paid, 5 mana and a card, right? They have access to drawing it, but if they're reanimating it, they probably don't have the means to cast it anyway. So, it's a good card. It also messes with people who are trying to top deck tutor with things like Vampiric Tutor, Worldly Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Mystical Tutor, etc. And finally, I've just got the cards that I play when I want to win the game. It's difficult for me to categorize them because it doesn't really matter what they do, right? These ones make tokens, or make tokens really big, and do a lot of combat damage. Triumph of the Hordes also kills people with combat damage. Morog, Fury of the Koam, also kills people with combat damage, right? The more interesting ones are Rurikthar. Rurikthar is cool because his effect is, he is a 6/6 for 6 with Vigilance and Reach. He attacks each combat if able, and then whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Rurikthar deals 6 damage to that player, right? The reason Rurikthar is in the deck, the way he justifies the spot, is because of all these cards I'm playing here, of cards that like actually help me win the game, this is the only one that's powerful when I'm behind, right? This is the only one that can like put pressure on my opponents to keep them from winning. And finally, I've got Berserk and Scapeshift. They're this one's a sorcery, this one's an instant. You can pump Radha up with her activated ability, make her big, you know, oh, I'll attack you for 3, no blocks, alright, I'll pay 7, 6 of it makes her an 11/11, then Berserk, 22 damage, right? It kills Radha, but it kills them, so I think that's worth it. And then Berserk's also good interaction when 2 of your opponents are going at each other. When one opponent's like attacking another opponent with a big creature, you, at the cost of 1 green mana, can make that creature a surprise lethal threat and kill it before it can be pointed at you, which is fantastic. And then Scapeshift, I just told you about my 45 lands and how many of them are win conditions, and I also showed you Titania, and Avenger of Zendikar, and Rampaging Baloths, and Omnath, and Morog. Like, I feel like Scapeshift sort of explains itself. It gets me a lot of lands, and I like that, right? Lands kill people in this deck. And finally, Seedborn Muse. This card is insane. Seedborn Muse is insane because of Urza Saga, right? Being able to untap my Urza Saga on each other player's turn means that I'm tapping into the exponential growth potential of Urza Saga. Normally this card's making 2/2/2s, right? And that's not a good rate. Maybe you have a Soul Ring, maybe you have a Mana Crypt, and it's a 3/3 instead, right? But if I can tap Urza Saga on each player's turn, it goes from 2 activations with mana that I kind of wanted to use, up to 5 activations, 3 of which are happening on my opponent's turn, and I don't really care about that. Like, it would go away anyway, right? I don't have that many mana outlets in my red-green deck. Like, I'm not playing Urza himself, right? So any mana that I can generate with Seedborn Muse that can go into Urza Saga is pretty much not doing anything else, but every time I can activate Urza Saga, it grows, like, you know, exponentially more, I guess not exponentially, quadratically more useful, right? I can have 3 3/3s, 4 4/4s, right? That's 9 power, 16 power, 25 power, 36 power. You know, it can go pretty nuts. And then get a Dockside Extortionist in the mix, right? If Dockside Extortionist makes, you know, 7 treasures, right? A normal Urza Saga, I'd have 2 9/9s. If I have 5 constructs and I make 7 treasures, I now have 5 12/12s, right? It just, the more activations of Urza Saga I can get, the nuttier it gets, right? I would consider something like Wilderness Reclamation. I think it's a little bit narrow because Seedborn Muse is like, you know, I'm not going to run into the wrong half problem with Seedborn Muse, because it's a creature. I can, you know, I can find it with a number of sources. If I find my Urza Saga but no Wilderness Reclamation, I'm just hoping to find it, right? I maybe gamble for it, and I don't have enough mana outlets in the rest of the deck to justify playing Wilderness Reclamation. Like, I'd take a look at it, you know. I don't think it's a horrible card, but also not untapping, like, my not untapping Scroll Rack, not untapping, you know, Elvish Reclaimer. The fact that it's all permanents instead of just lands makes Seedborn Muse an absolute house. This card is insane. Maybe I wouldn't be, you know, singing its praises if I didn't have Urza Saga in the deck. This is basically an Urza Saga deck. It doesn't look like it, right? We're used to Urza Saga's decks finding Mishra's Bauble and attacking with Dragon's Rage Channelers. But no. This is an Urza Saga deck. I bought all the tokens for this deck, and I I figured I'd use all of them. I don't know if I've used plant tokens even once, right? I don't know if I've resolved an Avenger of Zendikar in a meaningful manner. I use the construct tokens every single game. This is an Urza Saga deck. Yeah. So that's the game plan for Radha. If anyone has any suggestions, especially in regards to interaction, I'm like looking at this all spread out now and realizing, oh, I have quite a few redundant effects. Like this is not. I could go up on interaction. So if anyone has any recommendations for something that would slot in nicely, let me know. Until then, thanks for watching.